Like I tend to tell customers to do both at the same time. Just mix and match, right? Buy a little bit of your commitments, take a little off the top while you're doing your architectural work, right? If you wait for a year to do your commitments, you're going to pay on demand for a year, and that's very expensive.
Yeah.
There's ways, because like in a perfect world, you would right size everything, re-architect everything, and then commit. But what percentage of your applications do you have engineering headcount to redesign and re-architect, right? Like,
Right.
it's not even more than 10% usually for large companies. So you got to do both. You got to mix and match and go carefully, right?
Right. You're totally right there. You start slowly with maybe saving plans and focusing on big projects. And we're always talking about ROI, right? It's all about ROI. That's what we need to put in there because, like you say, reality taking might take a lot of energy or resources. But yes, that's a good point. But thinking about what would you tell these companies that are still thinking that FinOps is required or not?
I'm actually okay. Like I run into this too. I'll talk to companies and they're like, we don't have a cost problem. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate that perspective, and I'll probably talk to you next year. And that's okay. There's the shift left conversation is interesting because how do you shift left if you don't know you need to? How do you think about cost as a resource or spend money, dollars as a resource from an engineering perspective? You don't know you have cost pain. And the whole shift left thing and getting in front of FinOps is important, but until you know it's a business problem for your organization, it is really tough to prioritize without signals, without an understanding of, okay, we're over budget, or hey, we don't know what our ROI is. And I've had a lot of conversations over the roles and years and companies I've been at where we're like, oh yeah, we don't really need to think about optimization. And I've had other companies, hey, how do I optimize before everything? And it's like, well, that analysis is difficult. And I've also seen the opposite where companies will freeze and they'll do so much analysis for years, how to redesign everything to cloud native, that they don't move anything. And so both are bad. I can't say bad. Both have pros and cons. Let's say it that way.
Let's say that way.
Because you can have paralysis by analysis. You can just sit there and kind of strain against the problem for a long time and not making progress. And failing fast, I'm a huge fan of, and learning as you go, and because that's what creates expertise. That's what creates heroes in your organization, people that step forward and do the work to learn the lessons and feel the pain, right?
Yeah, definitely. You cannot be making the mistake of the analysis paralysis. You have to iterate fast and fail fast and learn. Because a lot of, even though we are engineers and we try to do things exactly and precise, they're all a lot of things are A/B testing and see if it works or not, and going to the hands-on work. And yeah, that's a very interesting thing. And I also can relate on the commitment versus right sizing thing. I had an experience with a company that made probably one of the best commitment exercises that I have seen. Yet they had a major problem with S3 buckets. That was super dummy to do. Like it just needed to put a lifecycle rule. And that's it. That they wouldn't need almost anything to do. Even though on the commitment side, they were like a perfect combination of reserve instances and savings plans. And I was like, I could never do it better. I was like, yeah, I check it. It was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we built the cost optimization, is to pull right sizing and commitments together into a single screen to show people that you need both. The amount of savings you get from right sizing can be pretty similar to the amount of savings from commitments. So do both, right?
So now that you're talking about this, and I'm curious to see, and I'm not sure how much you can tell, but this is probably fun. So when people in the AWS teams, in the AWS services release a new service with all the new costs and all the new structure and all new services, even though in Reinvent, it seems to be noticed that there wasn't any announcement in terms of new services. So they are maturing new things, which I think is also great. But when a new service comes, how do you approach it from your team? That's
a
I'm
good
curious to
question.
see.
Happy to share a little bit about how my team thinks about prioritization, how we think about the experience customers have when it comes to configuring, services most optimally. I would say that, like, from a very high level perspective, my team is not about savings. It's actually about performance. And this gets lost a little bit sometimes because we talk about costs so much, but we actually want all of our customers' environments to first be high performant. And the whole point of running your application in cloud is that it can scale. It can meet customer demand spikes that maybe were unplanned or unexpected.
Mhm.
And so all of our tools, Compute Optimizer, Cost Optimization Hub, like all of the recommendations we build, they're actually all of the analytics we do and the science and the models and the ML work is all about performance. So we study exhaustively the CPU performance differences between different models. We nerd out on that. We've got some incredible scientists in our organization that spend a ton of time on this. And we're looking at benchmarks. We do our own benchmarks. We compare them against real world usage numbers. We focus so much on performance. And it just so happens you save money when you focus on performance because you use faster processors and you can lower processor counts and still get better latency and better performance out of your apps with less cores. And so you see a lot of savings out of our products, but the recommendations are actually how to provision correctly for max performance. So Compute Optimizer, sometimes I get on a call with customers and they call it Cost Optimizer. And I'm like, no. It's Compute Optimizer. It optimizes the compute performance of your resources. And it just so happens to save you money by not blindly over provisioning. So when we talk to customers, we're thinking first about how do we serve their needs by providing services and products and capabilities so they can run a great app. That's the first goal. The second goal is, hey, you can use AWS efficiently and effectively, and it's going to scale with you, and it's going to provide you the opportunity to change your cost structure over time to serve your business. And when a new service is launched or a new feature is launched, we talk directly to customers. How are you configuring it? What's important to you when you're thinking about how to build with this service? Is there an opportunity to mistakenly over provision? Is there an opportunity to set a policy boundary that's incorrect or leads to unexpected cost increase? And so we look at how easy is it to fix that? Is it something that engineers need help with? Is it something that if we were building a recommendation, it would be easy to take that recommendation? Because there's a big difference between a recommendation that requires 2 or 3 clicks to execute versus one that takes the re-architecture of an entire product. So we think about that exhaustively. We think about, hey, what percentage of the customer's cloud bill is impacted by this resource? And then we also think about, hey, when we work with this service team, is this service team really experiencing feedback from customers where they're like, hey, this is a great service, it scales really well, but we have low visibility on cost. And then we really like working with the service teams, especially like when those service teams sometimes come to us and they're like, we want to build a recommendation. We're like, come on in, like, let's work together. And so we get the privilege of sort of working across all of AWS. And I mean, we built the new idle recommendations of the EBS team, the ECS Fargate team, right? Like, so we work with all the RDS team, the Aurora team. We work with all of these different service teams, and my team will bring the FinOps perspective, and they'll bring the service operations perspective and the advanced understanding of how the service works. So we'll work with their principal engineers. We'll say, hey, how are your customers configuring these resources? How do we provide a recommendation that is 100% safe, that is not going to break anything? And so we're a bit of a check and a balance with each other, right? Where they can check us from a quality and accuracy and safety standpoint, and we'll bring that FinOps perspective.
when you were talking about and I was thinking about the new services that come year after year, and because we had this conversation about with practitioners that you have I don't know, I think it was 700 types of easy instances that you can actually configure differently and all this stuff. And I was super interested on how you approach it, and I'm also prone to see like your customer obsession in general especially in AWS, because I was in the optimization day here in Madrid, and it was like obsessed with feedback and how customers do it, because I always think that it's easier to build from the customer feedback as well. It's way easier to do the products from that to the customer when you have customer feedback. Otherwise, it's guessing.
Yeah, it takes a commitment though, because it's not hard to look at your backlog, look at data already in your hands and prioritize a backlog, right? There's a lot of prioritization frameworks out there from a product manager perspective. But meeting with customers and seeing the frustration on their face or seeing the happiness on their face and converting that to data, right? And we have a product feature request system where our account managers, our technical account managers, and our solutions architects can feed that feedback into us kind of at scale across our whole customer base. Not just gathering that data and customer names and hey, who's struggling with what, but actually like sitting down and empathetically listening to, hey, you're a FinOps organization. You are trying very hard to influence your engineering teams to consider cost as a resource. Where is that working and where is it not working? What data sets do you need to make this argument more convincing? What data sets do you need to get engineers to take right-sizing recommendations more seriously, or to understand that they're safe and they're not risk, that, you're not going to incur risk by taking these recommendations? What do you need to empower your success? And if we can build a product that makes that FinOps practitioner 2 times more successful in their job, 2 times more impact on counting savings, getting to a unit economic number or something like that, that's really the success of that FinOps team is the success of my products, right? It's one and the same. And it's interesting because we talk about features and data sets and recommendations, but at the end of the day, FinOps is much more of a cultural movement, and it's a philosophical conversation on what does it take to instill bravery in engineers to make changes to the way they do things, and how do you pivot culture? And ideally, you have the right products and data sets to have a culture conversation and pivot on culture. But the culture part is harder. The culture part is harder than the software part, than actually building the features. But they have to work together. You have to have the right products, the right data, the right experience to make this culture conversation easier, to inspire people to build a product people enjoy using, and they share with their coworkers, they share with their peers in the industry. And they're like, hey, I was really successful with this. And this helped me really convince people that this approach to savings plans is the highest ROI, or this approach to right sizing is the most effective and the fastest to results, or whatever that is. The products must inspire that confidence to support the cultural change and the FinOps teams to really help influence engineering at scale.